Today, let's talk about anarchy. But first things first. If you took a survey and asked, what is an anarchist? Well, the answers you get would vary. From bomb-wielding no-goodniks, to vampire role players, high school kids who saw Breakfast Club one too many times.
Hey, how come Andrew gets to get up? If he gets up, we'll all get up. It'll be anarchy.
The action bros who saw Triple X one too many times. We are Anarchy 99. The queer clubbers.
I wanna be your alien queen.
The paramilitary types. But if you were to switch the question on that survey to what is anarchy, the answer you'll most likely get:
chaos. An unholy hellscape. No law, no order, no accountability. Only mayhem.
Because apparently when you take capitalism and the state out of the equation, we all just devolve into animalistic monsters. Not quite. See, unlike what the stereotypes and media portrayals and a certain cookbook might suggest, anarchy actually has never been about blood, death, and mayhem. Yes, there are times violent revolution may be the only way that things can be progressed, or so they say. But really, there's a lot of schools of thought on anarchy, including, but not limited to,
Black anarchy, collectivist anarchy, anarcho-communism, egoist anarchy, anarcho-feminism, green anarchy, illegalism, individualist anarchy, insurrectionist anarchism, libertarian anarchy, Magonism, market anarchism, mutualism, mystical anarchism, neo-zapatismo, anarcho-pacifism, philosophical anarchism, platformism, anarcho-primitivism, queer anarchy, aka anarcho-queer, social anarchism, anarcho-syndicalism, anarchy without adjectives, anarchist synthesis.
and for those of you playing our home game, yes, that was 17 different schools of thought. And that's just what you can find on Wikipedia. Like all things, if you went out into the world and actually looked, you could find hundreds, if not thousands, of splintered groups, including anarcho-veganism, which I still don't understand. There's also what I am calling the Forbidden Five, which will be named, but in my personal opinion are complete paradoxes, and I honestly took psychic damage when I first heard them. But what's the purpose of all this? Why am I getting into it? Well, first I want to strip down what we've been taught, all the propaganda, and get back to the core of what is anarchy. And then, once we've discovered that, what if I told you I believe we already have the perfect anarchist world, and we have had for a long time? But in order to understand that, we have to go back, way back. Although you can find what might be described as anarchist thoughts in the works of Zhuangzi and Lao Tzu in ancient China, which are considered philosophical anarchism, and whose works together would lay the foundations of Taoism, we never find the word anarchy in any of those texts. So, where do we first find the word? Well, that would be ancient Greece, with this word, Romanized and pronounced as anarchia, which had both a positive and a negative connotation. In the negative, it was the stereotype of a world without rulers devolving into perpetual chaos. But in the positive connotation, which seems to have been forgotten by all but the most niche historians, it actually described a world without rulers as evolving into spontaneous order. And don't think they were just throwing the word around either. Aeschylus, the father of tragedy, and Sophocles both used the myth of Antigone, daughter of Oedipus, to point out how the laws of the state were affecting personal freedoms. Plato used the negative connotation of anarchia to criticize and question Athenian democracy, whereas Aristotle used it to question how do we stop a democracy from falling into anarchy. Cynicism arose, defying human law to live instead with the laws of nature. Stoicism, in turn, asked for its followers to create a society based off of unofficial and friendly relations between citizens without the presence of the state. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and there's not a lot of activity that can be considered anarchism, except for a few ascetic and Muslim movements, as well as other organizations all around the world, calling for the end of monarchy and a libertarian lifestyle. This, of course, led to the foundation of religious anarchism, no matter the spiritual practice. Religious anarchy believes in the core message shared by all religions. Live simply, share the bounties of the earth, love yourself and your fellow humans, live in peace and harmony. And that anyone who uses those beliefs to control others is just as bad as any tyrant. And for those of you who, like me, we're going to quote the anarchist slogan, "No gods, no masters," well, it turns out that came from the phrase "ni Dieu ni Matre," said in 1880 by Louis Auguste Blanqui, who was not an anarchist. In fact, Blanqui was more close to communism, except he didn't believe in a workers' revolution. He didn't believe that the working class had any role in a social revolution whatsoever, but rather that a revolution should be held by a small group of people, held violently, and then the small group, having overthrown the state, would create a temporary tyranny in which they would establish a new order and then give the power back to the people. Yeah, right. Meanwhile, back in the Middle Ages, this is the point in the history of anarchy where, ironically, although I'm trying to prove it's not about chaos and disorder, the entire thing becomes a dumpster fire. You see, Latin had gotten a hold of anarchia, turned it to anarchy, and was now using it to describe the eternal existence of specifically the Christian God. Eventually, they began using it to promote the idea that humans are inherently sinful and should prostrate themselves before the almighty authority. John Calvin, he of Calvinism fame, even said, quote, "The worst form of tyranny is preferable to anarchy." What? Now hold on to your hats because this is where things get loopy. See, around this time, there was a group called the Ranters, who may or may not have actually existed. But allegedly, their beliefs held that if humans were made in the image of God, then humans were God. And because humans were God, they were immune to any laws, be it men's, the church's, or God's. And because we were immune to all laws, we could do whatever we want. Because if sin was also created by God, and humans are God, then sin was of God. And being that it was of God, it was inherently holy and should be pursued with vigor. That made sense, right? Yes, that's right. Eat, drink, smoke, do whatever you want, sleep with whoever you want, because you are God. That made sense, right? Also around this time was a group called the Levelers. They're not important. But who is important is an offshoot who opposed the Levelers' main ideologies. They were called the Diggers. The Diggers took one look at the Ranters, decided they were a bunch of drunken frat bros, and that they hated them. Understandable. The Diggers wanted to reject all human laws, all laws of the church, and just go out and be one with nature in the trees. Fair. From here, it passes through the hands of such men as John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Immanuel Kant, Edmund Burke, William Godwin, Wilhelm von Humboldt, Dantien Alphonse Francois, also known as the Marquis de Sade. We'll come back to him in a bit. And even Thomas Jefferson. Yes, Jefferson, who said that a stateless society is perhaps the best choice for all mankind, and once again I quote, the government which is best governs least. So the next time someone tells you that the founding fathers all pushed for a strong centralized government, punch. But even with all these people that we've gone over, none of them actually called themselves anarchists. So who was the first person to call themselves an anarchist? That and more will be answered in part 2.